If you've been a fan of NFL football for as long as I have, which is maybe for like just short of 15 years, you have seen a plethora of incredible running backs come and go, and seemingly none of them be remembered beyond like one, two, maybe three of the guys that I'm going to talk about in this video. So I'm gonna go through the 2010s, a decade I'm going to call the decade of the running back, and we're going to talk about some of these incredible athletes who seem to be buried in the record books as more and more as time goes on. I've compiled a list of all the notable, well, I shouldn't say all the notable, I've compiled a list of most of the notable running backs, guys who put up 1,000 yards rushing, guys who had 1,000 yards from scrimmage in a season, guys who did it year in and year out, and just because they weren't the top guy on the top team, you probably don't remember them right off the top of your head. But we're going to take it back to 2010 to begin our journey. In 2010, the NFL was led in rushing by none other than Arian Foster, who had 1,616 rushing yards and a total of 2,220 yards from scrimmage. On top of that, he had 3 seasons above 1,500 yards from scrimmage. And that pretty much perfectly exemplifies what I remember Arian Foster doing the best. As far as receiving backs go, he was definitely, he was probably the best receiving back right at that turn of the decade there, 29 going into 2010, right around there. I'm not going to act like he was on a great Houston team. Houston has never been a great team, at least in my lifetime, but he was a hell of a player for him while he was down there, and he could do just about everything. Going to 2011, out of Jacksonville, we have somebody you've probably seen on your TV plenty of times, and that is none other than Maurice Jones-Drew. This year, he led the league in rushing with 1,606 total rushing yards and finished the year with 1,980 total yards from scrimmage. I'll be honest, I don't remember very much about Maurice Jones-Drew. In the same vein of what I just said about that Texans team not being very good, not having anything to play for in that like mid-2000s area, Jacksonville was arguably worse. After what were the two guys' names? Thunder and Lightning were their nicknames, the wide receivers they had right at the beginning of the 2000s, mid-2000s there. But they were gone by the time MJD was leading the league in rushing. And I was like 12 at the time, so I'm going to be honest. I don't remember a damn thing about that. But it's a name that we probably don't remember. I have a hard time imagining we're going to go forward 20 years and somebody's going to say, God, you know who my favorite running back was? Freaking MJD. Going to 2012, we have the appearance of easily the most notable running back of the 2010s, probably of the 20-aughts as well, and that is none other than Adrian Peterson. In 2012, he ran for 2,097 total rushing yards. That year, he finished with 2,314 yards from scrimmage with a total of 13 touchdowns on 348 attempts. NAP was far from a one-season wonder. The man in the 2010s alone had 5 seasons where he rushed for more than over 1,000 yards, and he led the league in rushing 2 of those 5 seasons. Just looking at his ability on the field and his performance in the NFL, Adrian Peterson is arguably one of the greatest running backs of all time. You're talking about a guy who you're going to see in a little bit comes back from an ACL tear and then proceeds to lead the league in rushing again, and then continues his career to the point where at the age of 33 on a dilapidated Washington Redskins squad, he ends up going for 1,000 yards one last time, just because why not? But before we get too far ahead of ourselves and look at that, we're going to talk about one of the shiftiest sons of guns to ever be in the NFL, and that is none other than LaShawn McCoy. In 2013, LaShawn McCoy went for 1,607 rushing yards, finished the year with 2,146 yards from scrimmage. In the 2010s alone, he had 6 seasons with 1,000 rushing yards and 8 straight seasons of 1,000 plus yards from scrimmage. 5 of those seasons were above 1,500 yards from scrimmage as well. I can tell you firsthand, being a Giants fan, that LaShawn McCoy sucked. just suck to have to play twice a year. I mean, you could be holding LaShawn to a bad game, and his ability to just break out any run into that big-time touchdown run or that big-time first down when the team really needs it, unbelievable, unrivaled at the time. And it was something that was incredibly frustrating, as you can see from the Giants' record against the Eagles throughout the 2010s. I think we maybe won a game or two versus them. Something that's interesting is LaShawn actually finished his career with exactly 15,000 yards from scrimmage on the nose. And let me tell you, of course, I didn't want to just keep writing yards from scrimmage on my paper here. So I started just abbreviating it, YFS. What is that? Just say it as one whole word. What does that come out to? YIFs. They're YIFs. If you know what that is, I'm sure you can understand why I might be concerned. If you don't, you should Google it. It's awesome. It's great. Oh, and as if playing the Eagles wasn't bad enough, at the same time as when LeSean McCoy was terrorizing us, the Dallas Cowboys had none other than DeMarco Murray. Before Ezekiel Elliott came and had to be fed, we had DeMarco Murray, and he was the definition of a workhorse before injury took him out of the league in only, I think, like 5, 6, 7 years. In 2014, DeMarco led the league with 392 attempts for 1,845 rushing yards, a total of 2,261 yards from scrimmage, 13 touchdowns. And in 7 seasons, literally played 7 seasons, and in those 7 seasons in the league, the man averaged over 1,000 rushing yards per season, and then he just gone. It was so seamless how quickly and how, nobody even batted an eye when Zeke took over for him. It was just like, yep, DeMarco out the door, Zeke in. We're not even going to miss a breath. We're still going to be the Dallas Cowboys, so we're going to get to the playoffs and lose. And while DeMarco averaged over 1,000 yards rushing for his whole career, he only actually had 3 total seasons above 1K rushing yards, but he did have 5 seasons above 1,000 total yards from scrimmage. Over 1,000 YIFs. And snap back to reality. Oh, there goes Adrian again, leading the league in rushing yards with 1,485 yards on 327 attempts. He finished that year with 1,707 yards from scrimmage. And the most incredible thing, as I mentioned earlier, is he did this following missing a season for an ACL tear. He missed a whole season on an ACL tear and came back and led the league in rushing. Are you fucking kidding me? I genuinely can't overstate how determined and just how much of a love Adrian Peterson must have for the game of football throughout everything. I mean, again, I mentioned when he's 33, he rips off his freaking last 1,000-yard season. How many 33-year-old running backs have been able to do that? I mean, it's like him, Frank Gore, and I'm out of names. But I mean, the guy was just ridiculous. He could really hit a switch at any time. If you weren't sick of NFC East running backs already, guess what? The Cowboys have replaced DeMarco Murray with a man by the name of Ezekiel Elliott. And in his rookie season, he leads the league in rushing with 1,631 rushing yards, 1,994 yards from scrimmage, and 15 total touchdowns on 322 attempts. As great as Zeke was when he came into the league, you can't talk about it without mentioning the fact that he was behind a generational offensive lineman. That year, the Dallas Cowboys had 3 first-team All-Pro offensive linemen in Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, and Travis Frederick. Can you imagine how easy your job is when you have 3 of the top, 22 guys in the NFL on your line? If you can follow directions, if you can hit a hole, you're going to go off for 1,000. And that's exactly what Ezekiel Elliott did pretty much every year of his career so far. Almost. While he technically only had 3 1,000-yard rushing seasons in the 2010s, we'll just go ahead and give Zeke 4 because he had 1,631, as I mentioned. The next year he had 983. The year after that he had 1,434, and the year after that he had 1,357 rushing yards. I feel like we can give him I don't know which year you want to take it from, but we can give them 17 yards and just call it a day. Four seasons above 1,000 yards in the 2010s for Ezekiel Elliott. And then we get to one of probably the most surprising name we're going to come across in this whole list. In 2017, the NFL's leading running back was none other than the rookie Kareem Hunt with the Cleveland Browns. He went for 1,327 yards while being 6th in the league in total rushing attempts. He also finished that year with 1,782 yards from scrimmage, and in the 2010s, he managed to pull off 2 seasons above 1,000 rushing yards. Honestly, I'm not trying to throw like a ton of shade at Kareem Hunt when I say this, but the thing I notice most about that is easily the least amount of yards players had to have to lead the league in rushing in the 2010s. I mean, you got 1,616, 1,606, 2,097, 1,607, 1,845, 1,485, 1,631, and then you got 1,327, and they all led the league. Just shows you how any given year anybody can really do some shit with the right circumstances and the right team. And as much as I hate to talk about a Cowboys running back for the 3rd time in the course of this video, Ezekiel Elliott once again led the league in 2018 with 1,434 rushing yards, and he finished that year with 2,001 yards from scrimmage, just to barely break it over. The only other thing I really have to say about Ezekiel Elliott is him and Adrian Peterson are the only 2 guys who led the league in rushing yards twice from 2010 to 2019, and that's a good Jeopardy question, and I think that's got to be a good Jeopardy question. From 2010 to 2019, Adrian Peterson and this NFL running back led the league in rushing yards twice. Who is Ezekiel Elliott? And to cap off the decade, we have none other than Derrick Henry, King Henry, finishing out the 2019 season with 1,540 rushing yards, 1,746 yards from scrimmage, and 18 total touchdowns. Now, the most interesting thing about Derrick Henry is what he does in 2020 when he goes for, 2,000 yards, but that didn't happen in the 2010s. So we're only going to talk about this one season, and as far as I'm concerned, that's a damn good season to end the year on in terms of running backs and who led the league in rushing. Here's the crazy thing, and it's kind of the thing I've been getting at this entire time. Despite the fact that I just gave you the leading NFL rusher every year and only had 2 seasons that featured repeat leaders, there are still so many incredible running backs that I haven't even mentioned. Now again, mind you, this is only during the 2010s. Ray Rice, he had 3 seasons over 1,000 yards rushing, and he finished 2011 with 2,068 yiffs. Marshawn Lynch had 4 straight seasons over 1,000 rushing yards, 10 plus touchdowns, and over 1,400 yards from scrimmage. And as we all know, he also had literally one of the most incredible runs of all time versus the Saints. And then we have a guy who is maybe one of the only ones to rival Tom Brady in durability, and that is none other than Frank the Inconvenient Truth Gore. I had no idea that was his nickname until I was researching this, and that is a fucking incredible nickname. Frank Gore, the absolute beast, had 4 seasons over 1,000 rushing yards and 7 straight seasons from 2010 to 2017 where he topped 1,000 yards from scrimmage. Next, we have a name I expected to see so much more, and it blows my mind that he finished his career with less than 6,000 total rushing yards, and that is Jamal frickin' Charles. You want to talk about a guy who could do it running, catching, returning punts or kickoffs. Like, Jamal Charles, I feel like he's probably one of the most underrated guys of this time period. I mean, if you have been paying attention to football since, like, I think it was 2013 it happened maybe, when he played the Raiders and ripped off a 5-touchdown game, I've wanted to make a video just talking about that in and of itself, but I just haven't until now. And God, if you haven't seen the highlights from that game, Chiefs Raiders, I implore you to look it up right now and watch Jamal Charles just toy with the entire Oakland defense for a whole 60 minutes. In the 2010s, Jamal Charles had 4 seasons over 1,000 rushing yards and 5 seasons above 1,300 yards from scrimmage. He got really close to 2,000 yards from scrimmage twice, with 1,980 in 2013 and 1,935 in 2010. Next, we have none other than CJ2K, Chris Johnson, ending the 20-aughts with a 2,000-yard season. Sadly, he was unable to replicate that going into the 2010s. However, he was still able to get 4 straight seasons above 1,000 rushing yards. And then, just because we haven't talked about the NFC East enough, there's a fellow by the name of Alfred Morris, who, before Adrian Peterson came to town, was the running back for the Redskins at the time. He, in his rookie season, went for 1,613 yards and 13 touchdowns, and went on to have 3 seasons above a total of 1,000 rushing yards. And then he just disappeared, kind of like the rest of these guys on this list. I'm exhausted of talking about running backs, so I'm gonna rapid fire through these last guys. We got Matt Forte, 4 seasons over 1,000 yards rushing. He would have 5, except he needed 4 more yards in 2011. Eddie Lacy, his first 2 seasons in the NFL, 2,317 rushing yards, 20 touchdowns, 3,001 yards from scrimmage, before allegedly eating himself out of the league. We also had Le'Veon Bell with the Steelers, where he had 3 seasons over 1,000 yards rushing, as well as a season where he put up 2,215 yards from scrimmage, which, if I remember correctly, is the 3rd or 4th highest total of all the guys I've listed today, and he didn't even finish that year leading the league in rushing yards. That just shows you how much of a dual threat Le'Veon Bell was when they had the killer bees of Ben, Bell, Brown, and none other than Boswell. And the last running back I'm going to mention today is none other than Todd Gurley. In his first 4 seasons in the NFL, Todd Gurley went for 4,547 yards, 56 total touchdowns, and 6,430 yards from scrimmage. And while Todd Gurley wasn't our leading rusher in 2019, his best seasons came at a time where a lot of teams were figuring out what they wanted to do with their running backs. It was becoming a very big debate of whether or not you should have a high-paid running back, or you should be looking to have a guy on a rookie deal, or, you know, what should you do? Similar to the situation that I believe the last 4 teams in the NFL, aside from Mahomes, 3 of them had quarterbacks on rookie deals, and people are like, do we really have to pay quarterbacks now? And unfortunately, since Todd Gurley got an absolute bag, he was one of the first running backs to really freaking break the bank around that time, and he proceeded to get injured and not be able to replicate the success he had in previous seasons. People were like, yeah, we probably shouldn't pay running backs that much. Probably don't need to be given an arm and a leg just for the guy who carries the ball 20-ish times a game, 25 if we're up a lot early. And then we're at today in 2023. I mean, aside from Zeke and Derrick Henry, none of the guys I mentioned are even in the league anymore. How many of them do you think are even going to make the Hall of Fame? These are guys who put on incredible careers, guys who had several seasons over 1,000 yards rushing, multiple seasons over 1,500 yards from scrimmage. And yet, how many of those guys can we really say are going to be in the NFL Hall of Fame at the end of the day? Obviously, we got Adrian Peterson. We got Frank Gore. I think LaShawn McCoy is a pretty good bet. After that, maybe Zeke. Kind of depends on how the rest of his career plays out here. It's unreal to me how great of a group of running backs we were treated to throughout the 2010s. And I just wanted to show all those guys appreciation and love, because I love a damn good running game, a smash mouth game plan. And those guys were ready to butt heads any given Sunday. Of all the names I listed, who's your favorite? I would 100% have to go with Jamal Charles. Again, I can't even believe that he finished his career with under 6,000 total yards. But he did. Let me know who you think your favorite running back is down in the comments below. Leave a like on the video if you made it this far. Subscribe if you want to come back and see some more. My name is Zachary Taylor, and as always, I thank you for your time today.